Hello folks, welcome back to the channel, and just an update for you. There has been a new interview posted to the Square Enix blog about Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, with a focus of course on the Yuffie centered DLC. So we're going to have a look at that today. Before we get into it though, I just want to give you a heads up that on the 7th of May there is going to be a Square Enix live stream focused on Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier, and that's the Battle Royale game that's coming to mobile devices. I'm not too interested in that myself, but I'm sure some of you are. But more importantly, it's also mentioned here in the official press release that during this live stream, there will be new information for Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, which, of course, I am interested in. So I will be keeping an eye on that, and anything that we learn, I will be making sure to share with you. But just a heads up there, really, for the 7th of May. Now, let's get into the meat of today's interview, which was conducted with Hamaguchi and Toriyama, who are the co-directors of Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's not a long interview, and it's pretty much all focused on Yuffie herself. So if you haven't already, please do go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Got a ton of Final Fantasy content already for you, with plans for loads more to come, don't worry. And let's get into it. So we start with the question, what do you think makes Yuffie such a popular character? And this is really tying back to the original game. Toriyama-san says in the original, Yuffie was the type of person who would appear wherever and whenever she pleased. You'd never know or not if she was going to join you. Yeah, nice little callback there to trying to recruit Yuffie, who was, of course, an optional party member. So you had to go through a few questions and whatnot, didn't you? Which, yeah, it's easy once you've got the guide explaining how to do that. But doing it by yourself and trying to figure that out could have been a bit of an exercise in frustration. And effectively, she's going to pretty much be the same in Intergrade, or Intermission, which is the name of that specific DLC, as she was in the original game. Now, of course, Yuffie was not introduced in the original Final Fantasy VII to the player in this same fashion. This whole 2 chapters that we're getting with this DLC of her going through Midgar, trying to hunt down this special materia, was just not a plot device that took place at all in the original Final Fantasy VII. But in terms of her character, Toriyama says that she's very much the same Yuffie that we all know and love that appears in the DLC. She's still elusive, still does things at her own pace, but she's also fired up by her desire to exact revenge for her homeland of Wutai and to execute her mission as a ninja. Yeah, so don't forget, in Remake, there was some war that's been alluded to between Shinra and Wutai. So I'm guessing we're going to be getting a lot more information about that and those events, you know, during these couple of chapters, since Yuffie is going to be able to explain it all to us, no doubt. Hamaguchi says as well, when I think about Yuffie, the first things that come to mind are a materialistic materia hunter who's not comfortable or proficient with vehicles. Materia is Yuffie's motivation, and I was mindful to bring that aspect of her personality to the forefront in every part of the new episode, from the story to even the minigames. Okay, so we've got some confirmation there, as we expected, that there is going to be some aspect of minigame action to engage with Intermission. Now, I have spoke about it before. Fort Condor is getting a big change, it seems, in this DLC, or just in Final Fantasy VII Remake as a whole. It appears it's no longer going to be an actual location, or if it is, it's not going to have any minigames tied directly to the location, but in its place there's going to be a Fort Condor board game that's going to be popular throughout Midgar. Now, we never actually got any wind of this during the main playthrough of Final Fantasy VII Remake, but then I guess our party were just too busy to really pay attention to it. But that is going to be something that will be part of this particular DLC. And I'm going to assume that that's one of the mini-games, if not the major mini-game, that's being alluded to here by Hamaguchi. Oh no, does that mean that she's going to steal our stuff in the new episode too? We know that there was a big side quest in Wutai in the original Final Fantasy VII. By the way, there's a denial of that here, but I'm sure that could take place in the remake. But of course, that is going to be happening ahead of when these events are actually taking place. So this is before Yuffie and the party are acquainted. In fact, the events of Intermission, Yuffie's DLC, are actually going to be running parallel to the Final Fantasy VII Remake we played last year. We just never crossed paths, so to speak. Toriyama-san, yes, in the original Final Fantasy VII, she caused quite the hassle because she stole her allies' materia. Don't worry, in this new episode, she's the protagonist, so rest assured you don't have to worry about your valuable materia being taken away. With, of course, the side note that we'll actually be introducing new materia that wasn't included in Final Fantasy VII Remake. I wonder if some of this new materia that's been alluded to is going to be available in the main game as well, or if it is going to be strictly kept to Yuffie's DLC. I guess we'll just have to wait on that to find out when we get to play it ourselves. And then there's a question about the Moogle outfit, which, by the way, is not a brand new thing for Final Fantasy VII Remake. It was actually used in Dirge of Cerberus, which was a PlayStation 2 game revolving around Vincent. I'm sure some of you have played that. And in this case, Yuffie's going to be wearing it when she's on a covert mission. And finally, what can we expect from Yuffie in FF7R episode Intermission? Gosh, what is it with these flipping naming conventions that Square give to their Final Fantasy games? Just their games in general, actually. The new episode takes place at the same time that Cloud and company are continuing their fight in Midgar. The story follows Yuffie on her mission as a ninja operative tasked with stealing valuable materia from Shinra. So that's the story, or the overall basic plot. Our goal was to present players with a story that leads up to Yuffie's later encounter with Cloud and his group. In other words, that's going to be the encounter that we have in the original Final Fantasy VII, which certainly leads me to think that Yuffie and Cloud are not going to be crossing paths here. And in fact, that makes the most sense because these events are taking place parallel to the events of the original Final Fantasy VII Remake. You know, the game that we played on PS4 last year. And there's no mention by Cloud that he bumps into Yuffie or anything along the way there. So they pretty much have to keep them apart during this particular DLC. I would definitely encourage people who've played Final Fantasy VII Remake to experience it. When they've completed the game, I think they'll really enjoy it. Yeah, so it's expected that even though there's going to be 2 new chapters, you play them after the events of the main chapters that make up the remake itself. So I'm sure most of us will be doing that anyway, but for those of you that still haven't played Final Fantasy VII Remake and are interested in playing the Yuffie DLC, you might want to get to that if you can now before the DLC is released. Okay, so ultimately then, Final Fantasy VII Remake Episode Intermission, which is the DLC part of Intergrade, is of course going to be focused on the character of Yuffie primarily, but it's also going to be bridging the gap in the story between Part 1 and Part 2 of the remake. So it's probably going to be something important to play. Now, I suspect there's going to be quite a bit of story involving the Shinra and Wutai. Yuffie, of course, is from Wutai and is not happy with this war, and that's one of the reasons she's infiltrating Midgar to get this materia from Shinra in order to help her hometown. But in her quest, we're going to be learning a lot about the motives of both of these sides, and I do suspect that's going to play quite a big role going forward in the actual main game releases that are still to come as part of this project. And remember that Square themselves have said that they don't have a plan for continued DLC for Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is really a one-off. So it's probably going to be useful for us as players to actually play this thing if we're going to want to be able to keep up with the story going forward. And just a reminder as well, since it's at the bottom of the page here, that if you already own the PS4 version, you'll be able to upgrade to the PS5 version for free, but that doesn't include Intermission, which is the DLC. You'll have to pay for that separately, which I believe is $20. Although, if you purchase the PS5 version of Final Fantasy VII Remake, then that does include the DLC as well. So if you're doing the free upgrade, you don't get the DLC. If you're just purchasing the game outright, you do get the DLC. Hopefully that just clarifies that situation. Don't forget as well when it comes to the free upgrade that if you have the disc version of the PS4 disc version, but you only have a digital PS5, you can't use the free upgrade offer either. So that's the update, that's the interview. Now, perhaps a more important question, those of you that want to play it, have you actually managed to get hold of a PS5 yet? Because that is going to be the only way to play this particular DLC. I'm a little bit surprised we never heard anything after the 1-year exclusivity deal with PS4 about the game coming to other systems such as Xbox or PC. And I know that Sony have been pushing very hard with third-party publishers for various exclusivity deals. Maybe Square Enix will be part of that and just nothing's been revealed publicly. But yeah, we've just heard nothing about those other systems despite that 1-year exclusivity now being up for, well, quite a few weeks. Anyway, guys, Are you going to be playing Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade? Please do share your thoughts down below. Appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day. Stay tuned for more Final Fantasy content.